Next up, we are talking about turning equity into social impact. Pledge 1% is an initiative for companies to set aside equity prior to their exit to support their long-term social impact efforts. Here to discuss how investors can help founders put their money where their mouths are, please give a warm welcome to your moderator and my very dear friend, Jordan French, and your speakers, the CEO of Pledge 1%, Amy Lesnick, one of the most influential women of Bay Area, and the founder and chairman of Techstars, David Cohen.
Wow. See, we got some fans over here. Fans over here. We got some fans. They're about to do the wave, David. But big round of applause for Nastia Shvetsova, emceeing all day today. She'll never be thanked enough for all the hard work that she's doing. That's Nastia Shvetsova, your MC, good friend of mine. And another round of applause for Patty and the team. Brian's backstage, Mary Kavanaugh, she's the one who put all these panelists together. Big round of applause for them and the Web Summit team. Yeah, and then one more, let's keep rolling into it. Round of applause for yourselves for coming to Web Summit. And this really important talk, I really think, is one of the most important conversations that will be held during Web Summit, if not today. But first, a little bit, for the uninitiated, my name is Jordan French. We're the media outlet Grit Daily and also Block Telegraph in New York. We cover a lot of startups. We might have covered one of yours out in the audience. And just really quick intro to my right, a man who I don't think needs, and his company don't need an introduction. David Cohen from Techstars is joining us. Big round of applause for David for joining us.
Thank you.
And Amy Lesnick will be coursing us through this talk with Pledge 1%. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Dave.
Awesome. And so let's jump right in this, because there are a lot of inquiring minds out there, Amy. A lot of inquiring minds. And they see a topic like ESG, and they think, well, you guys are really successful up there. Maybe this doesn't totally apply to me. But that conventional wisdom isn't true. Amy?
Yeah, I think so. ESG is definitely on the rise right now. Not only is it important to companies, but also investors. And I think the topic more specifically, social impact equity, is definitely becoming the norm. Companies are increasingly setting aside 1% of their equity prior to their exit to fund their social impact as well as their ESG efforts for years to come. And top companies are doing this, like Airbnb, Coinbase, Twilio, Salesforce, Atlassian, and top firms and VCs and investors like David and Techstars and Excel and Benchmark and Bain and Battery are supporting this. So it's increasingly becoming the norm because it's not only the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. And I think we're going to talk a lot more about that.
Yeah, certainly. And also it begs the question, like, who should be involved in, and maybe why would they give away equity? I think there's a bit of a twist to this, right, David?
Well, I think the cool thing about startups that are giving equity or businesses that are giving equity is it doesn't cost them cash today, but it lets them take advantage of the impact today. And the advantages they get are being able to hire people. People want to work for companies that are doing good in the world. It's being able to attract customers, and more investors. Our LPs, who have given us $1 billion to invest, want us to invest in good things. Right? And so when they see us investing in companies that are building philanthropy into their business, right, that encourages them to continue funding organizations like us. So they see that rolling downstream, they see the impact. Companies don't have to pay for that necessarily in cash today, but they get all the benefits today for building that in from day one.
Yeah, certainly, and I think, for me and this audience, really interesting for you to frankly even be here talking about this. It's a bit counterintuitive. Let's just do a raise of hands. How many of y'all have know of the Techstars community? Perhaps you've applied to Techstars, the accelerator, or you just know it. Just do one hand or know it. Okay, so there's some people who actually are uninitiated, but you have let's say thousands of startups going through the accelerator each year in multiple cities. Right, yeah. David?
Yep. Right now we're funding about 600 new companies every year. The portfolio is over 3,000. Next year we'll fund about 800. So if you think about the impact of having those companies consider something like a Pledge 1%, where they set aside a portion of their equity, that can ignite billions of dollars of philanthropy. Techstars has 22 unicorns that have been through our accelerators. 4 of them have already done this. Companies like DigitalOcean, SendGrid, Remitly, right? Great companies that are building this in from day one and having enormous impact on their community when they do have an exit. But it also applies to tiny businesses, right? If you're not necessarily building a high growth company, by building philanthropy into your business this way and using the playbooks that Pledge 1% provides, you can have an impact on your community. And when your startup does good or your business does good, you give back, it's built in, and you've reaped the benefits all the way along while you built that business.
Yeah, certainly. We'll do another raising hands in this to really bring this home, because you mentioned LPs, and I want to get right back to that. It's an interesting conversation about outside investors telling you, hey, we should be paying attention to this, let's bake this in more and more. But for you, Amy, who here is involved in a company, running a company, anything that you're doing, and you're thinking about, hey, what's the long run game here? How are we positively impacting the world, even locally around us? Don't be shy. You can raise your hand. I would think it'd be everyone, right, Amy? I mean, I think it's the rest. If your hand isn't up, I'm going to assume you're shy. I'm going to assume that you're shy. I won't say or assume you're a psychopath, but I could. But on this note, Amy, just to lay some foundation for one thing, people have heard you articulate a few things about it so far, and I think are curious about your own background. There's a lot of other things that you could be doing, like what they're doing, right? Building companies. And to bring the point home for you, how did you get this off the ground, where people are giving away that sliver of equity for furthering some initiative that they care about?
Yeah, so a couple of questions wrapped up there. I think there's a little self-selection, so hopefully you're sitting here because you care about making a difference in the world. Pledge 1% is really a movement that's just about inspiring, educating, and empowering all of you to leverage your assets to be a force for good. So there's a flexible framework. You can leverage your equity, as we've been talking about. You could leverage your time. You could leverage your product or technology. But it's really thinking about what's unique to you and your company. Is it your voice? Is it your ecosystem? Is it your expertise? And how can you use that to really make a difference in the world? So I know what gets me excited personally, I've had the great fortune of spending 1 foot in tech and 1 foot in social change. I was early Netscape, and I spent a lot of time back then explaining that the internet wasn't going away. I kid you not. And it's my hope that someday we're not going to even be doing a panel like this. We won't need to explain why setting aside equity for social impact should be as common as setting it aside for your employee pool. We won't need to explain why integrating good business practices and social impact into your DNA is what it takes to create a successful business. It will just be the default, just like having a web presence. And so for me personally, I've had the great fortune of spending my career in social change and another foot in tech, and it's been a wonderful ride. I get excited by systemic change, and Pledge 1% is really the great force multiplier. If everyone here in this room basically set aside 1% of your equity or leveraged your own assets and reached out to kind of your partners and your customers and empowered them to do the same, just imagine the impact that we're going to have. So we're really changing the default here, and that's what we're going for.
Yeah, awesome. And so just within that conversation, you mentioned the words getting more common, and I definitely let's set that aside, because the normalization of baking this in seems to be thematic, especially looking ahead, especially in terms of governing, right, including your documentation and also how you run your company. But something interesting is happening on the back end with investors, which everyone cares about, they'll either admit it or not. In this entire audience at Web Summit, 72,000 people, we all want to know what's going on in these back boardroom conversations with the LPs, right, the people giving you the money as the GP, and what are they saying about this, David?
I mean, venture investors, we care about our investors too, our limited partners. Without them, we can't do what we do, and our job's pretty simple. They give us a giant bag of money, and we invest that money, and we have to give them back a bigger bag of money. So they look at it that way. That's the simple version of it. But more and more, and I would say almost all the time now, they're saying, and what is the ESG impact? What are the companies you're investing in doing? What are they not doing? That's important to us because they're the ones with the money. They want to make sure it's going to make the world a better place and make money. And that's become the standard. And so venture investors feel that today. We need to understand how our portfolio companies are doing good in the world and not just making a bigger bag of money. And so when we see companies that are interested in things like this, where they're building it into who they are and make it part of their values from day one, right? Rather than trying to think about it, someday when there's an exit, think about it as a partnership with the philanthropy over time. That allows us to talk to our investors and in turn get more capital over time.
And to just even pull on that same thread of the linen a little bit more, to repeat this back to you, it sounds like sovereign wealth funds, endowment funds, they're coming to you proactively and saying, hey, we want you to pay attention to this. We want to make sure that you're investing in the startups out there and the scale-ups that have built-in social impact initiatives.
That's right. Not all, but almost all at this point. It's one of the first questions they ask. They want to understand, let's look at your existing portfolio. Let's see what you've invested in. Let's see the impact they're having. Let's see how they're impacting their communities or the causes that they care about. Because after all, it's their money. They want to do good with it as well as make more money.
Yeah, certainly. And to some degree, so that's their money. But the equity, the startups and scale-ups, they're stewards of that equity. So a question that we've gotten even by email as it relates to this talk, Amy, is on the back end, right? It seems like an obstacle to know this early on. What do we, if we do the pledge, and it sounds great, but what do we allocate it towards? Is that some concern that you can address?
Yeah, I think we see a couple obstacles when we're talking to folks. First of all, it always seemed like the early stage folks thought, oh, this is something that I'll do later after I'm funded. And then the late stage folks would say, oh, actually, I wish I would have done that when I was just starting out. Now it's too late. I can never talk to my investors about this. There's no way they would dilute themselves. And so I think we're really working to kind of overcome all those obstacles. I mean, first of all, the answer is there's never a bad time to do good. If you're doing it early stage, you don't need to worry about, and even late stage for that matter, because a lot of late stage companies don't know what these assets are going to go toward. But what you're doing is creating the mechanism for you to have the funds for social impact for years to come. And they're going to grow. I mean, that's the beauty of it being a percentage of your equity. As your company gets stronger and stronger, and over time, hopefully, that stock price keeps going up. This isn't limited by a cash dollar amount. It's going to keep increasing. And so you'll have time over that period to hire a great leader, like in other areas of your business, to decide kind of what's material to your customers and your employees, to figure out where you can leverage not just your funds, but also your other assets to really have the greatest difference. And it will change over time. So the most important thing that we talk about is just putting a stake in the ground. You're communicating something really strongly to your employees, to your customers, to your investors, putting your money where your mouth is by saying, hey, we are putting aside 1% of our equity for the future. We'll figure out what that's going to go toward over time, but we know that we're putting aside a piece of our future success. And all of our employees who are working so hard and fighting the fight every day know that this is the value of our company. This is our culture. This is what's really important to us, and we can make a difference. And your employees will help you to determine kind of where those funds will go.
Yeah, certainly, Amy. In that vein, it does seem, David, kind of counterintuitive, almost karmic, to give something away, especially perhaps early on, or maybe, as Amy said, another objection. Maybe I'd call an excuse, Amy, is, oh, it's too late for us, and maybe never too late. But David, it's not just, poofy karma out there. There are specific, tangible things. For example, we were all listening, and Amy mentioned, recruiting. You touched on, investor dollars. But can you just share, some from your own experiences of the, over 3,000 investment Techstars, some quotient that's done, some of the benefits that they've seen from making a pledge like this?
Sure. Yeah, it's no coincidence. Those that raise their hand and know Techstars know we talk a lot about the idea of give first, which is sort of giving before you get. And to me, this sort of philanthropy is the ultimate expression of give first, right? It's this notion that you don't know what you're going to get back from having done it, because you're dealing with a complex system, right? It's a complex adaptive system. You don't know that it's going to be, because I did this philanthropic thing, that I'm going to get that customer. But it's going to come back to you almost in karma, like you said, and some other way, just like it does with Give First at Techstars. You have mentors that are helping you. They're not getting paid to do that. Something's going to come back to them because of their Give First to you. And they don't know what it's going to be, when it's going to be, what remuneration, what type, how it's going to come back to them, but it will because it's a network and it's a system. So the most common things we see from companies that do this is they get customers because of it, they get employees because of it, and they get capital because of it. The employee thing is huge. People today want to work for companies that are doing good in the world and are thinking about that and really living their value. That's something that everyone is looking for out there in the workforce now. I think customers, it's coming back to you in unexpected ways because someone is sort of just connected to that cause, right? And you're able to, whatever cause you've identified, you're able to talk about that, or they're able to sort of match that interest, and suddenly they want to do business with you instead of your competitor, right? And so again, you don't know where that's going to come from, but it's going to happen a lot throughout the course of your business. That's a reason to do it early and not late, because you can take advantage of that throughout the business rather than only at the end.
And certainly, and even just to repeat this back to you, we'll borrow from, we'll conjure the spirit of Michael Porter, competitive advantage. If you were to speak with him, perhaps you would be considering writing an additional chapter in the book that this is in fact a competitive advantage, the sort of slingshot versus the Goliath, to outflank others who aren't doing something and don't have the capacity to market that they've made a pledge or are giving.
100%, and I see it every day where larger companies or smaller, medium-sized companies are picking companies because of the values that they're living. And it's back to Simon Sinek, right? People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it, right? And so if you can match your giving to your reason for being, right, and build that in, people see that, and they see you living that value as opposed to just talking about it.
Right, certainly, and powerfully, just the psychology there, Amy, and to distill this, it sounds like it's association. Big enterprises, if they're looking at potential companies to do business with, they want to associate with other companies that are doing good. Even if they're the smallest one in the room, they're going to pick that one because it's advantageous.
Yeah, I was just going to add a stat on the employee side too, because I think we all know there's a great war for top talent. Even maybe with layoffs and a loosening up and everything, it's still really hard to attract and retain great talent. And so 50% of employees right now, per surveys, are saying that they're open to leaving their job and going somewhere. That's kind of the world that we're living in right now. But that stat drops to 12% when the employees feel that their company is making a positive difference on the world. So these are real numbers that are material to your business. And I will say on the customer side, I know that Twilio, which is another Techstars company, always talks about the number one rated session at Signal, their big conference every year, is always the one where they have a nonprofit talk about the impact the Twilio product and the Twilio knowledge base is having. Twilio focuses on crisis and really getting the right resources to people kind of in need, in a time of need. And they, through the COVID time period, reached over 300 million. It's part of their commitment to try and have a billion people get access to vaccines. So they reached 300 million people with kind of life-saving information and resources on how to get COVID vaccines. And it's things like that that really bring their product to life and really excite people to want to use Twilio technology and to want to work with a company like that.
And you provided this example from Twilio and impacting what sound like 300 million people. I think I heard that number.
Yeah.
But it's not about a specific objective. Any of the companies here in Web Summit's broader audience, those who might watch this at home later on the live stream or in a later recording, they might have some other objective. It's open-ended, if you will, when you make the pledge. They don't have to decide now, for example, and do all this, buttoned up work to decide and commit to it. Amy?
That's right. I mean, companies are all leveraging their assets, whether it's their equity or kind of their product, to make a difference. So Techstars, for instance, just created an $80 million fund focused on helping Black entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs of color who previously have less than 1.2% of venture funding. So that will be 400 entrepreneurs that will now be supported. Techstars recognizing what they're good at and how they can make a difference and leveraging it that way. PagerDuty, I just ran into Jen Tejada on a different stage. They're really looking at getting the closing the gap, like curing the gap in information in vital times, and they focused on health and social justice. Automation Anywhere, I just came from a Ukrainian, I'm sure we've heard a lot on Ukraine, all of us. They created a bot working with a humanitarian organization that is helping volunteers on the front lines, helping refugees to reduce kind of their processing and intake time by over 200 hours a week. Like, people are doing real things, making a real difference, leveraging their product, their technology, and their time. And I think the trick is to figure out what's unique to you and how you can do that.
Yeah, certainly. It sounds like these contemporary examples. They chose well, or certainly they were certainly impactful. And look, I'm sold, but conceptually, this all sounds great, Amy, and we all want to pledge. I mean, at a minimum, doesn't look like a downside. It's kind of like another put option on our startup. Too obtuse, too early? No, I can run with that. What are the mechanics of walking through this process, Amy? Like, if we want to, right now, actually pledge or just get involved and more granularly be specific about social impact, how exactly is Pledge 1% helping us?
Sure. So Pledge 1% is an open source movement. So anyone who is a decision maker for their company can go on to the website and you can pledge, the word pledge, the number 1, the word %.org, and you can take the pledge. It takes like 30 seconds, and you'll have access to an open source learning community, resources, playbooks, how to get started, how to leverage your time, your product, and whatnot. On the equity front, I would encourage you, if you're a company or if you're a VC who's interested in becoming a boardroom ally, and we're really fortunate in that we've been able to make this change because of an incredible coalition of VCs and CEOs and really incredible partners to make the difference. So I would recommend just emailing equity@pledge1%.org. And if you're a VC, we can tell you how to become a boardroom ally and send you the playbook on helping CEOs. We actually have a very detailed guide to help your GC and your CFO and resources. And if you're a company that's interested in doing it, there's models that are more appropriate for early stage companies, models that are more appropriate for late stage companies that spread the dilution over time. But you're not alone. There's a great coalition that's making this happen, and we're just here to help.
That's awesome, and I think there's likely a lot of gratitude here that you're spearheading this. Someone needed, to shine a light in the dark room, perhaps, because we saw a lot of hands raised for those who were wanting to make an impact, but not necessarily have a clear avenue or that light in the dark room to pursue. But equally, right, inquiring minds here, and me too. I want to know. We heard a little bit from David about some of the successes, and some have pledged. But what, Amy, does success look like?
Well, as I mentioned, to me, success is really changing the default. For us, we have a 5-year plan right now. About 12.5% of US-based tech IPOs set aside equity. We want that to be 55% in 5 years. More of those will probably happen toward the latter half of those 5 years with markets as they are right now. But we're expecting that hockey curve. And then for us, it's not just about igniting billions of dollars, and we've already ignited about $2 billion. It's about helping them to propel that pledge into action. We do that through our open source community as well as through our Builders program, and then really growing the movement. We have 17,000 members worldwide. We're hoping to get that to over 50,000 in the next 5 years. But ultimately, the end road is everybody does this. The question is, I love when David says, why aren't you doing it?
Get involved. Don't leave here and say that's a great idea and it's for other people to do. If you're an investor, get involved, support it with your companies. If you have a business, get involved, take the pledge. We'll help you figure it out through Pledge 1%.
Amy, I'll hinge on that word, propelling these companies in this initiative, the movement forward. That's all the time that we have. My name is Jordan French with Grit Daily. Big round of applause for Amy Lesnick.
Oh, thank you.
Pledge 1%.
Oh, so much. Thanks.
David Cohen, Techstars. Until